Level 1. The idea. You're 26 years old and you clock in every morning at a job that pays just enough to survive. You spend your lunch breaks scrolling through stories of people who built something from nothing. At night, in a rented room barely big enough for a bed and a desk, you sketch out numbers on the back of a receipt. You do the math again and again, trying to find a version where quitting doesn't feel like madness. Your reason is simple. You want to give your parents a life better than the one that raised you. You start small, selling snacks you make in your own kitchen to co-workers and neighbors. The first sale feels bigger than it is. Someone paid you, actual money, for something you made with your own hands. You reinvest every rupiah instead of spending it on yourself. Your friends think it's a phase. Your parents worry you're wasting time better spent job hunting. You don't argue with them. You just keep working, quietly after hours. You learn to package products at midnight and deliver them before your day job starts. Sleep becomes something you negotiate with, never something you fully get. Slowly, orders start coming from people you've never met. A stranger leaves a review calling your product the best they have had in years. You save the screenshot. It becomes the thing you look at when you want to quit. You start setting aside a small notebook, tracking every sale like it's sacred. Your girlfriend notices the exhaustion in your eyes, but says nothing. Not yet. You promise yourself this is temporary, that soon the hard part will be over. You don't know yet that the hard part hasn't started. A local seller offers to introduce you to a supplier who can double your production. You hesitate. The offer feels too easy, too fast for someone like you. But the idea of finally scaling up is intoxicating. You say yes, not fully understanding what you're saying yes to. That night, you can't sleep, not from exhaustion this time, but from hope. You imagine a future where your name means something, where your family never has to worry about rent again. You still believe, at this point, that hard work alone will get you there. You have no idea how many parts of yourself you'll trade along the way. For now, you're still just a young man with a notebook full of numbers and a stubborn kind of faith. That faith is about to be tested in ways you can't yet imagine. Level 2. The hustle. 6 months in, you quit your job against everyone's advice. Your parents call it reckless. Your girlfriend just goes quiet. You throw yourself into the business completely, working 16-hour days without complaint. You learn everything on your own. Photography, marketing, customer service, delivery, routes. Every skill you're missing, you teach yourself at 2 a.m. through free tutorials. Slowly, your small operation turns into something that looks like a real business. You hire your first employee, a teenager from your neighborhood who needs the work as much as you need the help. Paying someone else's wage for the first time feels like crossing an invisible line into adulthood. Orders triple in a matter of weeks. You can barely keep up with demand. You start showing up to family gatherings with gifts you actually bought yourself. Your mother cries the first time you hand her cash and tell her not to ask where it came from. It's the first time you feel like the sacrifice might actually be worth something. You move out of your rented room into a small rented shop house, half home, half warehouse. You sleep on a mattress in the back, surrounded by boxes and invoices. Your girlfriend starts helping out on weekends, packing orders beside you until midnight. For a while, it feels less like a burden and more like something you're building together. A local business page features your story, calling you a rising young entrepreneur. The comments flood in, strangers cheering for a version of your life you're still living day by day. You screenshot every kind word, the same way you did with that very first review. Bigger buyers start reaching out, offering deals that could triple your monthly income overnight. One buyer wants a bulk order, but insists on a price so low it barely covers your costs. You take the deal anyway, telling yourself that volume will make up the difference. It doesn't, not entirely, but you're too far in to admit that out loud. You start cutting small corners nobody would notice. A cheaper ingredient here, a shortcut in packaging there. Nothing dishonest, you tell yourself, just smart business. Your employee asks for a raise. You promise it, then quietly push the conversation to next month. You tell yourself you'll make it right once the bigger orders come through. For now, you're still the same person who started with a notebook and a stubborn kind of faith. But the notebook has started collecting numbers that don't always add up the way you'd like. Level 3. The debt. To meet demand, you need real capital, more than you have saved. A cousin introduces you to a lender who promises fast approval and easy terms. The interest rate is higher than you'd like, but the cash arrives within a day. You buy new equipment, rent a proper storefront, and finally look like a business instead of a hustle. For the first few months, the loan feels like the smartest decision you've ever made. Then the repayment schedule catches up with you, tighter and heavier than you expected. You start juggling which bills to pay first and which ones can wait another week. Your supplier calls asking why payment is late. You promise it's coming, even when you're not sure. You take a second, smaller loan just to cover the first one's monthly payment. Nobody around you knows how close the whole thing sits to collapsing. From the outside, your business still looks like a success story. Customers see clean packaging and fast delivery, not the anxiety behind every transaction. You start sleeping with your phone beside your pillow, afraid of missing a call from the bank. Your girlfriend asks if everything is okay. You say yes because the truth feels too heavy to say out loud. You skip your employee's promise raise again, telling yourself it's just one more month. He starts looking tired in a different way now, the way people look when they've stopped expecting better. A competitor undercuts your prices using ingredients you know are lower quality. Customers start comparing prices without knowing the difference in what's actually inside the product. To keep up, you quietly swap one of your own ingredients for a cheaper substitute. You tell yourself it's temporary, just until the loan is under control. The product tastes almost the same. Almost nobody notices. You notice every single time. Late one night, you sit alone doing the math for the 100th time. The numbers work, technically, but only if nothing goes wrong. You know, somewhere underneath the exhaustion, that something already has. You've started making decisions the version of you from a year ago wouldn't recognize. You tell yourself everyone in business does this, that it's simply how the game works. It's easier to believe that than to sit with what it actually means. Still, you push forward because stopping now would mean admitting how far you've bent. The debt shrinks slowly, but something else, something harder to measure, keeps quietly growing. Level 4. The deal. A year later, your business finally turns a real, steady profit. You open a second location, then a third, faster than you ever planned. Investors start noticing, offering money in exchange for a piece of what you built. One offer stands out. Fast growth. In exchange for control, you're not sure you want to give up. You take it anyway. The number is too large to say no to. With their money comes their people, and with their people comes their rules. You're told to cut costs wherever possible, including on your employees' hours and benefits. The teenager you once hired, now a grown man with a family of his own, gets his hours quietly reduced. You know it's wrong. You approve it anyway, telling yourself it's just business. At home, your girlfriend, now your wife, sits across from you at dinners that feel more like meetings. She asks when you'll actually be present again, not just physically in the room. You promise things will slow down once the next milestone is hit. There's always a next milestone. Your son is born during your busiest quarter yet. You miss his first steps for a supplier meeting overseas. You tell yourself you're doing all of this for him, even as you miss the moments that were supposed to be for him. A former mentor, the man who first taught you how to negotiate contracts, asks for a partnership on a new venture. His terms are fair, generous even, built on years of trust between you two. But a rival offer comes in from someone with deeper pockets and a faster timeline. You choose the rival deal, and you let your mentor find out through a mutual contact instead of from you directly. He calls you once. You don't pick up. You tell yourself you'll explain later. Later never quite arrives. Your business doubles in size within 6 months of the new deal. Magazines start using words like visionary and self-made to describe you. You start believing them a little more each time you read the words. At home, your wife stops asking when you'll be present. She simply stops expecting it. Your son starts calling the nanny for things he used to run to you for. You notice, somewhere in the back of your mind, but there's always another meeting to attend. You've built something enormous. You've also started losing something you can't yet name. For now, the growth is too loud to hear anything else. Level 5. The Empire. Your company now spans multiple cities with your name on the front of every building. You sit in boardrooms where decisions affecting hundreds of employees take less than 10 minutes. A smaller competitor run by a young founder who reminds you of who you used to be struggles to survive against your pricing. You could ease off. You choose not to. Business is business, you remind yourself. Within a year, their company folds. You buy their assets for a fraction of their worth. You tell reporters it's simply the free market at work. Privately, a part of you remembers exactly what it felt like to be on the other side of that story. Your former mentor's business, the one you outbid years ago, quietly shuts its doors. You hear about it secondhand from someone who assumes you'd want to know. You send no message. There's nothing left. You tell yourself that words could fix now. At home, your wife tells you she's taking your son to live with her parents for a while. She says it gently, but the decision underneath it is not gentle at all. You promise to change. You've promised this before, and she knows it. This time, she doesn't argue. She simply starts packing. You watch your son's room grow emptier over a single weekend while you're on a call in another country. When you land, the house is quieter than any office you've ever sat in. You throw yourself into work because it's the only place that still makes sense to you. Your board celebrates record quarterly earnings the same week your family leaves. You raise a glass at the celebration dinner and smile for the cameras. Nobody in that room knows what the smile is covering. You start surrounding yourself with people who agree with everything you say. It's easier that way. Disagreement lately feels like something you no longer have patience for. Your old employee, the teenager you once trained, quietly resigns without much explanation. Someone tells you he's opening his own small shop nearby, doing things the way you used to. You laugh it off in the meeting, calling it a nice hobby for someone without real ambition. Alone that night, the comment doesn't sit as easily as it did in the room. You've built an empire. You just can't remember the last time it felt like it was worth building. You tell yourself the feeling will pass once the next deal closes. It doesn't pass. It just gets quieter, the way most things do when you stop listening to them. Level 6. The throne. You're now one of the most recognized businessmen in the country, featured on stages you once only watched from a screen. Young entrepreneurs quote your old interviews as if they were gospel. You have everything the 26-year-old version of you once dreamed about, and then some. You also have a house too large for one person, and rooms you haven't opened in months. Your phone buzzes constantly with numbers you don't recognize, all wanting a piece of your time. Real calls, the ones that matter, have become rare enough that you almost forget what they sound like. Your son, now a teenager, sends a birthday message that reads more like a formality than a wish. You reply late, and generically, the way you've learned to reply to everyone else. At board meetings, people laugh at your jokes a beat too quickly, a beat too loudly. You've stopped being able to tell who actually respects you and who simply fears your position. One evening, a routine health check reveals your blood pressure has been dangerously high for months. The doctor asks how long you've been under this much stress. You realize you can't remember a time you weren't. Sitting alone in this waiting room, you scroll through old photos on your phone out of habit. You find one from years ago. You, your wife, and a small boy standing in front of your very first shop house. None of you are smiling for a camera in that photo. You're all just laughing at something you can no longer remember. You realize you can't recall the last time anyone in your life laughed like that around you. That night, you sit in your enormous, empty house and finally let yourself feel how alone you actually are. You think about your mentor, about the message you never sent him. You think about your old employee, about the joke you made in that meeting. You think about your son, about every message you replied to late, and generically. For the first time in years, you stop moving long enough to actually feel the weight of it all. You pour a drink and don't finish it, staring instead at the empty rooms around you. You build a throne, and somewhere along the way, you forgot to build anyone to sit beside you on it. Being at the top, you realize, was never supposed to feel this much like being left behind. You think about how much of yourself you traded piece by piece without ever noticing the total cost. You think about the notebook, the one with the numbers, the one that started all of this. You wonder if that version of you would even recognize who's sitting in this house right now. Something in you, quiet and stubborn, refuses to accept that this is simply how the story has to end. For the first time in a long time, you decide you want to change before it's too late to matter. Level 7. The Reckoning. The next morning, you cancel every meeting on your calendar for the first time in a decade. Your assistant asks if everything is all right. You tell her honestly that you're not sure yet. You drive, alone, to the address you haven't visited in years. Your old mentor's house. He opens the door older than you remember, surprised to see you standing there. You don't rehearse a speech. You just tell him the truth. Plainly, about the call you never returned. He listens without interrupting, the way he always used to when you were young and unsure. He doesn't forgive you instantly, but he lets you sit down anyway, and that's more than you expected. Later that week, you find your old employee's small shop, the one you once mocked in a meeting. You walk in as a customer, not as his former employer, and order without announcing who you are. He recognizes you anyway. There's a long, uncomfortable pause before either of you says a word. You apologize, simply and without excuses, for the raise you delayed and the joke you made. He tells you the shop is doing fine. Better than fine, actually, and that surprises you more than it should. You ask if you can invest quietly, without your name attached to any signage. He agrees, on the condition that you actually show up sometimes, not just send money from a distance. You start restructuring your own company, reversing the cuts to workers' hours you once approved without thinking. Your board resists at first, calling it bad for quarterly numbers. You tell them for the first time in years that some numbers matter more than others. You call your wife, not to ask her to come back, but to ask what she actually needs from you now. It's an uncomfortable conversation. It's also the most honest one you've had in years. You start showing up to your son's school events, sitting quietly in the back rows at first. He doesn't run to you the way he did as a small boy, but he does, eventually, start talking to you again. It's not the life you pictured at 26, wealthy and admired and untouchable. It's smaller than that, slower than that, and somehow it feels more like something real. You keep the company running, but you stop mistaking its size for your own worth. Some nights you still think about everything the climb cost you, the people, the time, the years. You can't get all of it back. You know that clearly now, without flinching from it. But you can decide every single day going forward who you choose to become instead. The notebook from years ago sits framed on your desk now, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. You made it to the top. What matters now is what you do with the view. In a small shop across town, a young woman in her early 20s counts the day's earnings by hand. It's barely enough to cover tomorrow's supplies, but she smiles at the number anyway. An older man walks in, not to buy anything, but to ask how her first month in business has gone. She recognizes him from an interview she watched 100 times for inspiration. He doesn't offer her money, he offers her his time and tells her honestly what the climb might cost. This time, the cycle doesn't have to repeat itself alone.